Guys, Jackie, how you doing? I am on day number 29 of my 30 days, 30 Malaysian cooking tips. And by the way, this is going up onto YouTube, and YouTube is where I get the most trolling from. And I posted one of my 30 days videos, and someone was complaining that I was just talking and not actually doing any cooking. That's the whole point, guys. That's the 30-day challenge is about talking about cooking tips, not actual cooking, okay? But anyway, so today we are going to talk about making roti canai dough. And if you caught my masterclass on the weekend just passed, I will have covered this in great depth, okay? But I figured I might just give you kind of like the Cliff Notes version of this with regards to roti canai dough, okay? Now, when I started out my Malaysian food business, I didn't know how to make roti canai, okay? I was selling other stuff, but eventually I managed to learn it. But in the process, while I was actually in the food scene, I met up with a lot of Malaysian chefs here in Australia, and they didn't know how to make roti canai then either. So there are a lot of theory going around about what actually made the dough really stretchy and flippable and all that sort of stuff, as is the case online as well. You find like it's one of those things that I think people get a little bit hyper. People get a little bit like intimidated by, because they think there's this kind of like secret secret recipe or secret technique that's beyond them. Therefore, that's why they haven't been able to flip roti canai, okay? And by the way, say hello and do hashtag live. And if you're watching this live, and hashtag replay if you're watching a replay of this, and just tell me where you're watching this from, okay? So anyway, so with the whole roti canai thing, I went through that whole process as well in my learning journey. And there was theory about how it was the condensed milk that helps it stretch. It was like, some were saying, oh, you have to put egg in it to help it like stretch, and others say no, not the whole egg, but just the egg whites, because of how egg yolk can just cause problems with the dough in like actually being counterproductive. And then of course there was like these theories about how you have to get a particular brand of flour that's not available in Australia for it to work. Okay, so all these different kinds of theories. And by the time I actually got around to being able to make roti canai good enough to sell, I had incorporated all these different theories into my roti canai dough. So my roti canai dough, if you look up, my really old blog posts and all that, will have all these different things. It has egg white, it has condensed milk, it has like ghee, it has, getting the right gluten level in my flour by experimenting with different types of flour, right? All these different things, and I managed to flip the roti, okay? So now fast forward like 10, 20 years down the track, and I've started to realize that, look, a lot of the time, as with a lot of other recipes as well, and that's, hey Azwan, that a lot of the time, with a lot of these recipes, it's the technique actually makes a big difference. Hey, Karen, the technique makes a big difference in terms of your success with what you're trying to make, okay? I think people sometimes give too much credit to following everything to the letter, okay? So over the years, as I've learned how to pass different recipes, I've made it my point to actually analyze them more objectively by comparing and contrasting different versions of it, okay? And you know what? Since then, I've actually tried a number of different roti recipes, sometimes by accident, and they all work out, okay? Because the technique, like I said, I've managed to nail the technique of how to flip it and flip it thinly, okay? Now, there are obviously a number of caveats that I want to mention. Okay, I'll just give you an example. First of all, I had a person come and learn how to flip roti canai from me about a year or so ago, and I decided to try a new recipe on them, okay? And this was a recipe that was supplied by Traders Hotel Kuala Lumpur, who had a legendary mama chef that they brought in specially to make roti canai, and he taught me how to make it, right? But his recipe was completely different to mine, and even the way he prepared the dough was quite different to mine as well. But I thought, okay, I tried it and everything turned out beautifully. And of course, during when he was training me, he didn't write down the recipes because everything he did was agak-agak, just to guesstimate, right? So he said, oh, don't worry, I'll send you the recipe through the hotel later on. And they did. So I went in blind, I got the recipe, pulled it out, and got this student, okay, let's have a go at making this. I want to prove the point that obviously it works because I've seen him make it and it worked beautifully and it's completely different to my recipe. So we followed the recipe and threw in a dough mixer, and then we realized after we'd added the water, without even giving it a second thought, because we were just reading off the list, that whoever transcribed the recipe from the chef had written down the wrong amount of water. So instead of having a dough, we ended up having a batter. Okay, so you can imagine how completely off that recipe was. Try to tip out some of the water, add more flour, add other stuff, and then produce something that obviously bore no resemblance, that was so incredibly compromised, bore no resemblance to the chef's recipe, but made it so that it was a dough so that we could work with it. And you know what? We managed to make it work, flipped it beautifully, no problem. So it goes to show, even like with a recipe that's been messed up, it still works. And obviously, he used a different brand of flour, because in Malaysia, they'll have different types of flour to what we can get over here, to what we were using over here, and it worked, okay? And then more recently, my fellow Masters of Malaysian Cuisine chef, Nora Harun, she put out a recipe for Roti Canai, and I had a go at it the other night as well, and it turned out beautifully as well. And again, it was very different to mine, okay? No egg white and all that sort of rubbish that I incorporated into my own recipe, just simply because I was trying to incorporate all these different theories to give the best chance of to my dough of being able to be flippable. Okay, and likewise, I've also since met someone who makes roti canai for a living, but albeit using a factory machine sort of thing. And what goes into his recipe is just flour and salt and water. Okay, not even like anything fancy or nothing like that. So it just goes to show you don't need all these different bells and whistles to produce a good roti canai. Now, like I said, back to my point earlier, having said that, there are a couple of caveats, okay? And I think watching people make roti canai, where they go wrong a lot of the time is I see your food photos online, okay? A lot of time where they go wrong is that the dough becomes too hard to stretch, okay? It keeps shrinking back in, okay? When you throw it, when you try and stretch it, it keeps shrinking back in, okay? That's because the dough hasn't rested enough, okay? It hasn't rested enough, or you've over kneaded it so that it's so incredibly tight and tense that it won't stretch, okay? You need to let it rest, and you want to let it rest at room temperature. We're talking about Malaysian room temperature, not like in the height of winter in an unheated room kind of temperature, okay? Because that will affect how stretchable the dough is as well, okay? So think in the context of roti canai dough being made in Malaysia. So what I used to do in my restaurant is I would actually basically warm up the dough a little bit in my oven. I'll just crank on the oven for like 1 minute at lowest setting, turn it off, let it go down to like about 50 degrees or something, stick my roti canai dough in there and let it sit so that it just gently like rested while it just softened as well. That made it a lot easier to stretch. But again, you need to give it time, okay? Don't be impatient. Now, having said that, on the other flip side as well, there is a danger of letting it rest for too long, okay? So if you let it rest, you want to like be able to use the dough within a particular window, okay? If you, and it's happened a couple of times in my restaurant, well, let it rest sitting in the oven and then spaced it off, and the next morning it rested for like 16 hours or 12 hours, something like that. Then what happens when you try and stretch it, right? It tears, okay? Because it's just been too long since you've made it, and it just kind of like, it's lost its kind of elasticity. So if you get to that point, you can't use it, you have to throw it out, okay? So you want to be able to use it within a particular window, not too early, not too late. Sometimes, you can get away with using it a little bit earlier than what they suggest. Usually they say 8 hours, okay? I've been able to use my roti canai dough within 4 hours, even less than that, okay? But yeah, if it's too tense and all that, either you've kneaded it for too long or you haven't let it rest enough, or at the other end of the extreme, if it just keeps tearing and whatever, it's probably been rested for too long, okay? So these are kind of like the Cliff Notes tips regards to making roti canai that works. Okay, and obviously, look, hey Karen, obviously I am going really fast here, and obviously there are a few other things that you have to take into consideration, not to mention the technique as well. But my video on like flipping roti canai is still floating around, but it will but I've got a masterclass, like I said, that I ran on the weekend, and it was to do with my Malaysian Street Food Academy launch. So if that's something that you're interested in, go and check out the video. There's an offer there, one-off offer that's going to last for only 24 hours. If you're watching this now or over the next few hours, there is an offer there for you to work with me in a community at the lowest price ever, okay? And it's never to be repeated, but make sure you check it out. It's very, very limited. And like I said, the clock is ticking, literally. And but if something, if you're wanting to scale up your Malaysian cooking skills, and you want to learn from someone like me who isn't just kind of all talk, but who's actually implemented all these strategies in cooking and in in my recipes and all that successfully by running a Malaysian food business for decades here in Australia, then go check it out. Okay, like I said, tomorrow we're on the last day of my 30-day challenge. Tomorrow we're going to talk about popiah. Okay, popiah skin. I'll see you then. Ciao.